On the 26th of May 2005, the Association of University Teachers had its biggest, most representative annual council meeting ever. This followed a series of debates in branches and campuses and universities of the AUT up and down the country. No single branch, once we got the chance to discuss it, no single branch came out in support of the boycotts of Bar Ilan and Haifa. There were one or two close votes, one or two odd resolutions saying that academic boycotts weren't wrong in principle, and there was a good deal of expression of support for Palestinian academics and Palestinian students operating under very, very difficult circumstances, as there should have been. But once we had the debate in the branches, no single branch came out in support, in endorsement of the boycotts of Bar Ilan and Haifa. Not at the Open University, where I debated with Stephen Rose. He lost. Not at Birmingham, where Sue Blackwell's own branch refused to endorse her proposals for a boycott of Bar Ilan and Haifa. Not at Oxford or Cambridge or at LSE or King's or UCL, where a very big meeting voted against the branch committee. There were 10 votes for the boycott, 150 against. The 10 votes were the members of the branch committee. That's the situation that we face. And not one branch endorsed the boycotts. Why not? What's the key message here? What's the key argument? I think Jonathan's right. It's about consistency. Consistency is a virtue. The boycotters say, we're concerned about injustice, we're concerned about the situation facing Palestinian academics and students, we're concerned about the occupation. I say, yes, you're concerned. And you're concerned in a particular way. I'm concerned too. Concern is not a bad thing. Selective concern is not such a hot thing as universal concern, as general concern. I come from a universalist tradition. But selective concern I can understand. What isn't appropriate, what is wrong for our union, what is wrong for the academic culture of Britain is a selective conception of justice. Selective justice is no justice. It's unjust. It's a form of injustice. And you, the boycotters, are selective, selective, selective all the time. It is unjust to punish people, to ostracize people, to boycott people who are not picked out by any morally relevant criterion, any criterion that makes sense, any criterion that can be generally or universally applied. And in this case, of the people who are picked out, it just so happens that most of them are Jews. So that's the nub of the argument, that this act is unjust in and of itself. Daniel Statman, the moral philosopher, Israeli moral philosopher, who, by the way, has written an Open University set book for one of our philosophy courses, so I'm not quite sure how the institution's going to work if we're going to have to boycott his work on Aristotle's virtue ethics. Dan Statman's cancelled his trip to the British Society for Ethical Theory. There are a couple of interesting things about this. One of the reasons he said he's cancelling is because he doesn't want to be in a room in which he thinks people might have voted for the boycott and want to exclude him. And I can understand that. There's a further difficulty, though, kind of mirror difficulty. I don't want to be nice to Statman because he's an Israeli. I don't want to welcome him. I don't want to say how very brave you are to come here, how very much I want to hear your paper. He's a philosopher. He's a pretty good one. I think he's wrong about the ethics of targeted assassination. I want to have an argument with him about that. I'd like to argue with him, I'd like to try and change his mind. I'll treat him professionally. But he's not coming to the BSEC conference, so I can't have that argument. There's an ethical code to the way in which philosophers behave towards each other. What matters always and only is the argument, not the credentials of the person making the argument, not the politics of the person making the argument. The boycotters, in ignoring that, do damage to the whole project of academic inquiry. The whole boycott argument is one big ad hominem argument. It's attacking people for what they are, not for what they do, not for what they say. So, what needs to happen is that we need to organise, we need groups of people to take the arguments out on every campus. We need people who will support each other in a nasty, vicious, sour argument. Don't underestimate the wear and tear on yourselves, and address yourself clearly to two audiences. I want to end with two messages. One to Sally Hunt. Sally, there's a few hundred people here, and there's a few thousand people, UCU members, out there who are pretty annoyed. We want a say. We want a vote. How about it, Sally? And here's a message to the boycotters. Here's what you say, and here's what we say. They say, the boycotters say, what about Palestinian students and teachers? We say, yes, what about them? What about Sorsan Salome, who unjustly was refused entrance to Hebrew University Jerusalem, who we, with Gisha, the Israeli human rights organization, organized a writing campaign whose case was ignored by the boycotters and the leadership of the UCU. There's a reason for ignoring it. What's the reason for thinking that Sorsan Salome's case for acceptance at HUJ was important? Well, it's wrong to discriminate in access to education on the basis of nationality. That's not a case that the UCU leadership can make credibly, and it's not a case that the boycotters can make credibly. What about the actual material steps of support that can be made? What about getting a policy of support for Palestinian and Israeli academics that can actually win the support of the membership of the Union? Not a policy of posture that divides the Union, and not to an attitude that projects onto Palestine the narrative of Stephen and Hilary Rose, another form of Orientalism. You think it's okay to threaten legal action against members of the Union who say things that you don't like. That's your prerogative. But I'm a trade unionist, so I won't do that. They say, don't ask the members what they think. They're ill-informed. Let's keep the discussion to ourselves, the superior beings, the activists. But we're Democrats, so we don't buy that. They say, will you please stop going on about anti-Semitism? But we're anti-racists, so we won't do that. They say, stop banging on about academic freedom. Don't you realise it's a privilege? But we're academics, so we kind of put a high price on academic freedom. That's what we are. We're Democrats, we're leftists, we're trade unionists, we're academics, and we're anti-racists. Some of us are Jews and some are not. And we're partisans of the cause of a Palestinian state alongside Israel. We want an end to the occupation of the West Bank. We're partisans for peace and justice, both for Palestine and for Israel. So, you see, we can walk and chew gum at the same time. That's who we are. And every time we get to have our say, just like we did right here on the 26th of May 2005, we're going to say no to the boycott. We're going to make our voice heard. We're going to kill this thing. Thank you.